Demon Slayer begins with a tragedy. Tanjiro Kamado's family is slaughtered, and his only surviving sister, Nezuko, is turned into a demon. From this brutal opening, a profound question emerges. In a world this cruel, how should a person live? It's a question some of us may often ask, but here, it is both existential and deeply philosophical. Tanjiro answers with compassion. He chooses to remain gentle, even to the demons who have taken everything from him. Zenitsu fights despite being consumed by fear. The feral Inosuke slowly learns of love and friendship. Nezuko, despite becoming a demon, holds on to her human heart. Character after character, from the Hashira to the demons themselves, carries a past that forges their values and choices, shaping their future. And through them, we understand. Behind the fights that sometimes appear childish, behind the breathtaking animation of every scene, lies a deep narrative about trauma, choice, and humanity that the author Koyoharu Gotug wants to share with us. Tanjiro Kamado's story begins in the quiet solitude of a mountain forest. After the passing of his father, he lived a simple life with his mother and younger siblings. As the eldest son, he stepped into his father's role, providing for his family with a sincere goodwill that was simply his nature. But tragedy arrived without warning. His entire family was grotesquely slaughtered, and Nezuko, the only one left, had become a demon. Anyone else in his shoes would have chosen the path of revenge, cursing the world, cursing the demons. And this is what makes Tanjiro so unique. He transforms this dark tragedy not into vengeance, but into a quiet strength to eradicate evil itself. He accepts reality with wisdom and resolves to become a demon slayer. Yet, his determination does not erase his gentleness. He continues to love Nezuko with all his heart, even when the world sees her as an enemy. One of Tanjiro's most defining traits is his deep empathy, even for demons. He always sees the human within them. This isn't weakness, it's a rare moral strength. He knows that these demons were once human, brothers, sisters, people manipulated by Muzan. He is able to separate the sin from the sinner. The greater his suffering, the greater his compassion becomes. He performs acts of kindness not because he is naive. It is precisely because he has seen such evil that he chooses to remain good. He knows that hatred cannot be answered with more hatred, but with kindness, because he believes that through kindness, any wound can truly be healed. Tanjiro is willing to do anything to protect and stay with Nezuko, even when facing the Hashira. Their situation is perilous. Nezuko is a demon, seen as a threat by humans, but she is also hated by other demons for defecting from Muzan and defending humans. Yet, the two remain steadfast. Nezuko herself is willing to fight the Upper Moon 4, Hantengu, to the point where her body begins to burn in the sun, all to save the village swordsmiths. While Tanjiro weeps, trying to shield her, Nezuko pushes him away, urging him to save the others first, and yet, a miracle occurs. Nezuko survives, becoming the only demon immune to the sun, a feat likely born from a combination of Muzan's blood, her Kamado lineage, her own strong will, and a mutation in her demon blood art. When we first meet Zenitsu, he is perpetually terrified, afraid to die, afraid to fail, afraid to be abandoned. He trembles before a fight even begins. Many dismiss him as a coward, but Zenitsu represents a profound truth. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act in spite of it. When he is so scared that he passes out, his true self emerges, a swift, focused, and lethal swordsman. Zenitsu is a symbol for those who feel they are not strong enough, not smart enough, not brave enough, but still walk on. Even if he resists, even if he must be forced, even if he trembles, Zenitsu takes the step, and in that lies a strength in its most fragile form. Inosuke doesn't know his parents. He was abandoned and raised by wild boars, living in a world without human affection. It's no wonder his mindset is brutal. Might makes right. He wears a boar mask not only to intimidate, but because he doesn't know what his own human face is supposed to look like. His mask is a symbol of a vacant identity. When Tanjiro and Zenitsu show him affection, Inosuke is confused, but slowly, he learns to trust, to accept help, and even to apologize without feeling defeated. He remains wild, but his instincts are now aimed at a new purpose, not just to be the strongest, but to protect. The Hashira, the pillars of the Demon Slayer Corps, are not just powerful warriors. Each is a living philosophy, a different answer to the question of how to live after tragedy. Tomioka Giyu, the water Hashira, is defined by a deep-seated guilt. He believes he is unworthy of his title because his friend, Sabito, died saving him and other candidates during their final selection. He carries the wound of a survivor, believing his life belongs to someone else, which is why he maintains a cold distance from others. Without Giyu's small act of mercy in the first episode, Tanjiro and Nezuko's journey would have never begun. This is the reason why Tomioka Giyu always keeps his distance. He doesn't like crowds, is not comfortable with praise, and prefers to be silent. Not because he is arrogant, not just because he is quiet, but because there is indeed a deep wound within him. He carries out justice in silence, as if trying to repay a debt to Sabito's death. This figure, who barely speaks instead, becomes the foundation of a major moral change in the story. Without Giyu, Tanjiro, and Nezuko would never have started their journey. And through that, we see that even silence can save, that there is a truth that does not need to be shouted, but simply done. Shinobu Kocho is one of the pillars of the Demon Slayers, a user of insect breathing. Although she always smiles calmly and seems friendly, that smile hides a deep trauma and vengeance. She leads the treatment center of the Demon Slayer Corps, and unlike the other pillars, her sword is not sharp, only pointed at the tip, because she kills through poison, as if wanting the demons to feel a slow death. All of it is rooted in an old wound. Her family was killed by a demon. Since childhood, Shinobu lived with her sister, Kanai Kocho, and her adopted sister, Kanao. Kanai was cheerful and full of hope, while Shinobu was more cynical in response to the loss of her parents. But Kanai taught one dream, that humans and demons might be able to live side by side. That dream was shattered when Kanai was killed by Doma, the second upper-ranked demon, and Shinobu inherited her smile only to hide her anger. She did not truly believe in the dream of peace anymore until her meeting with Tanjiro and Nezuko began to change her perspective. She saw a brother and sister from two worlds protecting each other. At first, she wanted to kill Nezuko, but was prevented by Tomioka. And after seeing their sincerity, Shinobu began to waver. Perhaps Kanai's dream was not so utopian, not so idealistic, and could possibly be achieved. Shinobu and Tomioka both carry wounds from the past. But if Tomioka chose to be silent, Shinobu chose to keep smiling. Although behind that smile, her heart never truly healed. Rengoku's signature phrase is the flame pillar with a flame cloak, flame hair, and a blazing soul. His entire being is a burning life spirit that shines brightly, making him one of the most striking figures in this series. In accordance with his fiery character, Kyojuro is able to ignite the spirit within himself as well as the people around him. Kyojuro was born into a family of demon slayers, inheriting the flame-breathing technique from his father, Shinjuro Rengoku, and wisdom from his mother. But after his mother died, his father sank into despair and distanced himself from everything. In the midst of that destruction, Kyojuro chose to rise. He trained relentlessly, replacing his father as the flame pillar. And even though he was not acknowledged, he held no grudge. He instead kept smiling, kept being a flame for others. In the Mugen Train arc, Kyojuro leads the demon extermination mission on the Infinite Train with Tanjiro and the others. When Enmu tried to conquer the Slayers through dreams, Kyojuro remained unaffected because he had no personal dreams. There were no selfish ambitions in his mind. All he had was responsibility. His fight against Akaza, the upper-rank 3 demon, became his final battle. His body was destroyed, but his soul did not waver. When offered immortality, he refused. He said it is better to die as a human than to live without humanity. He stood until the end with wounds, with loss, but without surrender. Kyojuro is a figure who in the real world is present as a teacher, an older brother, or a friend who chooses to be a candle, knowing he will melt away, but continuing to shine so that others are not lost in the dark. He did not live long, but long enough to warm many souls, and maybe that is more than enough. Uzui Tengen is one of the Demon Slayer pillars with a unique fighting style, sound breathing. He first appeared during Tanjiro's trial at Oyakata-sama's residence with a striking and arrogant attitude. But behind that, Tengen holds a past full of wounds. He comes from a strict shinobi family, a place where children were just pawns of war. His father trained them like tools, then sent them to the battlefield to protect the family's dignity. Out of 9 siblings, only Tengen and his younger brother survived, but they had different views. His brother inherited the cruelty of their father's principles, while Tengen decided to leave and live as a human, not a tool. Tengen did not completely abandon shinobi traditions, but he rejected them when it came to life's values. He did continue to practice polygamy like the shinobi tradition, but not for the sake of power, but because he loved and wanted to protect his 3 wives more than himself. When fighting against Gyutaro, the upper rank 6 demon, Tengen was severely injured, poisoned, and lost one hand. But due to his endurance and luck, as well as Nezuko's help, he survived. After that, he decided to retire from the Demon Slayer Corps and live peacefully with his wives. However, his spirit was not extinguished. He continued to train the younger generation to be stronger in facing a greater evil. Tokido is the pillar of the Demon Slayers, a user of mist breathing. He is quiet, forgetful, and often seems disconnected from the world around him, because indeed, most of his past memories have been buried by trauma. As a child, Muichiro lost both of his parents. His mother was seriously ill, and his father died while trying to find medicine. After that, he lived alone with his older brother, Yuichiro, in an old hut left by their parents. When Amane Ubuyashiki came and offered them to become demon slayers, Yuichiro firmly refused. He believed that only chosen people deserved to help others, and Muichiro was not one of them. But one night, a demon attacked them. Yuichiro was severely injured, and in a desperate situation, Muichiro suddenly released a great power from within him, beating the demon until it was destroyed. But that victory came too late. Yuichiro was dying and could not be saved. When Amane returned, she welcomed Muichiro as a future demon slayer, and from there Muichiro trained hard until he became the youngest pillar in the Corps. After his memory returned, his personality slowly changed. He was no longer completely cold and empty, but began to care, be friendly, and protect the young demon slayers. Although he was the youngest, his presence instead became a support for his colleagues. Mitsuri Kenroji is the love pillar in the Demon Slayer Corps. She is known to be cheerful, fond of complimenting, and has a unique fighting style with a flexible Nichiren sword like a whip. Behind that sweet and spirited attitude, Mitsuri holds a deep wound regarding self-acceptance and love. Since she was a child, Mitsuri grew up with extraordinary physical strength and a large appetite, making her seem different from the ideal image of women in her era. When she turned 17, a man canceled a marriage proposal just because she was considered too strong, too strange, and too unfeminine. The man even said that only wild animals would want to marry her. Since then, Mitsuri began to hide who she was, dyeing her hair, holding back from eating, and acting weak to be considered worthy of being loved. The days were lived under pressure. She kept pretending to be someone else just to be accepted, until finally she asked herself, will life always be like this? Until one day she met Oyakata-sama. From there, everything changed. Oyakata-sama saw the kindness of her heart and the unique strength within her, and said that the people who could not see it were just blind people. Mitsuri then began to accept herself again and chose to become a demon slayer, training under the guidance of the flame pillar, Kyojuro Rengoku. Sanemi Shinazugawa, the wind pillar, is known for his harsh, brutal, and explosive nature, even towards fellow demon slayers. But behind all that, he holds a deep wound and a great love. Sanemi came from a poor family, and since childhood was the eldest of 7 siblings. One night, his mother turned into a demon and slaughtered almost the entire family. Sanemi killed his own mother with trembling hands and a broken heart. Only Genya survived. Since then, Sanemi vowed to eradicate demons, whatever the method. He is known as a cruel slayer, even willing to injure himself so that his blood, which is poisonous to demons, could be used as a weapon. But Sanemi's anger is not just hatred. He distances himself from Genya, pretending to hate him because he feels guilty, feels unworthy of being an older brother, and wants Genya to live a normal life without also bearing the grudge and blood. He also rejected Nezuko outright, insisting that all demons are evil, until he slowly softened due to Tanjiro's sincerity and Genya's sacrifice. In the battle against Muzan, Sanemi fights with all his might, even though his body is full of wounds. Genya dies by his side, and only then does Sanemi truly accept that the love he hid was never gone. It's just that he realized everything when everything was already too late. Sanemi is a strong wind, painful on the surface, but gentle in its deepest core. He is not just a strong pillar, but a wounded older brother who learned that affection doesn't have to be shown with gentleness, but must be expressed before everything is too late. Obanai Iguro is the serpent pillar in the Demon Slayer Corps with a breathing technique and fighting style that is agile like a snake. His childhood was tragic. He was raised by his family not as a child, but as a sacrifice for a serpent demon. He was caged and given delicious food to keep him pure, until one day, the demon tore his mouth to make it look similar to its own. When trying to escape, Obanai was almost killed. Luckily, he was saved by the Flame Pillar. However, as a result, the demon slaughtered his entire family. Obanai was blamed, and from then on there was no home he could call a place to return to. He joined the Demon Slayer Corps under Oyakata-sama and transformed into a Hashira willing to sacrifice for the sake of truth. He did not discard his past wounds, but instead made them a strength to defend the weak, even if it meant using the power that once threatened his life. Obanai also has a deep closeness with Mitsuri Kanroji, a fellow pillar who slowly touched his long-frozen heart. Obanai is the image of a child who since childhood was treated not as a human, but as a means for others' ambitions. But he grew up to be someone who did not repay the world with hatred, but instead chose to protect even if it meant being hurt. Gyomei Himejima is the stone pillar and is recognized as the strongest among all the Hashira. His figure is tall and large, always crying in silence, holding prayer beads, and praying more often than speaking. But behind his tears is hidden an extraordinary power, and within his silence is embedded an unshakable faith. He is a blind person, but it is precisely from that limitation that he honed a thrilling physical and spiritual strength. Before becoming a pillar, Gyomei cared for orphaned children in a temple, but one night, a demon slaughtered them all. He managed to save one child who, out of fear, instead accused Gyomei of being the perpetrator. He was then imprisoned, sentenced to death, and lost everything. But Oyakata-sama saw the truth and recruited him to become a demon slayer. Since then, Gyomei fights not only with an iron ball and chain, weapons suitable for his body and condition, but also with prayers and forgiveness that never leave his heart. He believes that true strength is born from sacrifice, not anger. He does not hate, even praying for the demons who have killed innocent people, because for him, hatred will only prolong suffering. In the final battle against Kokushibo, the upper rank 1 demon, Gyomei was on the front line with Sanemi, Genya, and Muchiro. The battle was brutal, and Gyomei eventually fell, but he died in peace, feeling that his prayers had been answered, that the world could be saved. Gyomei is an unshakable stone, a silent foundation in the middle of a storm. He is strength in silence, faith in suffering, and love in a world ravaged by hatred. There are a great many demons faced by Tanjiro and his friends as the story progresses, and it is impossible to discuss them one by one. So, what will be discussed are a few that have bold characters and are also very influential in the story. Kyogai was once an ordinary human who loved art, writing, and music, and greatly wanted to be acknowledged. His works were considered unworthy, and his self-esteem slowly eroded. In desperation, he became a demon, hoping that power could replace the meaning he never found as a human. He still failed in Muzan's eyes, labeled useless and discarded. He no longer knew who he was, except as a figure who kept beating a drum to assert that he still existed. Tanjiro defeated him not with hatred, but with respect for the effort of a human who once wanted to be meaningful. And from there, Tanjiro began to understand. Demons are not always born from evil, but from a sense of rejection, from the destruction of self-worth, and from a loneliness that is left to grow for too long. Rui is a demon obsessed with building a perfect family, not because he knows its meaning, but because he lost the form of love from the very beginning. Before becoming a demon, he was a sickly child whose own body rejected him. When he changed, he believed that his parents hated him, whereas they tried to kill him and themselves because they couldn't bear to see the child they loved become a monster. He rejected that reality and rebuilt a family structure from other demons he controlled. But his created family was not built with love, but with power, fear, and domination. He forced bonds he did not understand, calling other demons father, mother, younger sibling, older sibling without feeling the true meaning of those words. In his fight against Tanjiro and Nezuko, Rui saw something he could not have. A love that protects each other, not one that controls. He realized that true love cannot be forced. And on the other hand, Tanjiro himself achieved his true strength, not because of hatred, but because of love and the desire to protect. Rui shows that humans cannot live without bonds. But when that bond is broken from the start, we can spend our lives chasing its shadow and unknowingly hurting others for the sake of an illusion that was never really there. Enmu is a demon who destroys humans not through power, but through dreams, by giving the illusion of happiness and then slowly tearing it away. He believes that the deepest suffering is when someone has to let go of a happiness that cannot be had in the real world. With the ability to manipulate Mjrae dreams, he traps his victims in a world where wounds heal, families come back to life, and everything feels peaceful. But to awaken, they must do the most painful thing, kill themselves in the dream, as Tanjiro did to escape the flight that nearly made him forget reality. Enmu represents the greatest temptation of man, to live in a dream that numbs, even if it is false. But Demon Slayer reminds us, to keep living, we must dare to kill the illusion. Akaza first appears after Enmu is defeated at the end of the Infinite Train battle before Tanjiro and Kyojuro Rengoku. Strength is everything. He considers humanity a weakness and offers Rengoku immortality so he can transcend the limits of a mortal body. But Rengoku refuses. He stands until the end. Body broken, soul intact. Akaza does not retreat because he lost physically, but because he could not understand a principle that endures without self-interest. Behind his brutality, Akaza holds one rule that he never breaks. He does not kill women. This creates tension between him and Doma, who, conversely, makes women his primary prey. Without realizing it, that attitude is a remnant of his humanity that once loved and lost. His past is revealed in the Infinity Castle arc. He was Hakuji, a poor child who stole to save his sick father. However, his father committed suicide so that Hakuji would not grow up to be a thief. After losing his way, Hakuji was taken in by a martial arts master, given a home, honor, and love. The master's daughter became his fiancée, but that happiness was snatched away when their entire dojo was massacred by a rival. In desperation, he slaughtered the entire rival dojo in return and attracted Muzan's attention. He accepted Muzan's blood not because of ambition, but because he could no longer bear to be human. He cast aside his name, love, and past, exchanging everything for a power that could prevent loss. In the final battle against Tanjiro and Giyu, Akaza pushes himself to the final limit, trying to prove that strength is everything. However, the buried memories begin to return. His father, his master, his fiancée. The Hakuji that he had long buried reappears. Akaza refuses to regenerate. He chooses to die. Not simply because he lost, but because he wanted to stop killing and return to being human, even if only for a moment. Akaza was not defeated by a sword, but was defeated by memories he could not discard and a wound that never healed. He hated weakness because within it was the feeling of loss. But in the end, he made peace, and in the decision to not rise again, therein lies his true victory. Daki and Gyutaro are demon siblings who share a body and a hatred. They are not just demons, but also victims. Two children who grew up in a world that never taught love. Gyutaro was born in the entertainment district in a state of deformity and poverty. Thin, dirty, and shunned. Even his own mother tried to kill him. He grew up filled with shame, surviving in dark alleys while eating insects and being insulted by everyone. Everything changed when his sister, Umi or Daki, was born with extraordinary beauty. Daki became the center of attention, and Gyutaro, who was once hated, was now feared for being a protector as well as a debt collector. Together they built a name and success in a world that previously rejected them. However, destruction came quickly. Daki stabbed the eye of a samurai and was burned alive as punishment. Gyutaro arrived too late. finding his sister's charred body and screaming in total devastation. Not just because of the loss, but because the world once again took away the only thing that made his life meaningful. As they were dying, they were offered immortality by Doma and became demons. Gyutaro kills everyone who is considered beautiful and perfect, not because he is bloodthirsty, but because of vengeance, wanting the world that once destroyed him to also be destroyed. Daki, on the other hand, continues to live off praise. Beautiful, but manipulative, relying on her brother when cornered. After being defeated by Tengen and Tanjiro, they argue on the verge of death, blaming each other. However, Tanjiro stops them. He knows, as the older brother of a demon, that the world may curse them, but they can still accept each other, because even though no one loves them, they should be able to love one another. Daki and Gyutaro were not born from evil, but from a world that only sees appearance. The ugly Gyutaro was cast aside, the beautiful Daki was made an object. They are the shadow of a world without love, and that is why they choose to hate everything they once desired. Gyoko is a demon with a body resembling a pot, a face that moves around, and a high-pitched, mocking way of speaking. He appears eccentric, but behind that is hidden a disturbing obsession with art. An art that he creates from suffering, deformation, and death. For him, the human body is just raw material for a masterpiece. He attacks the swordsmith village not merely because of orders, but because he looks down on the sword craftsmen who are considered not to understand true beauty. He carves the bodies of his victims into disgusting statues and then proudly displays them like sublime works of art. On the other hand, Muichiro Tokito looks like a child who is disconnected from the world, cold, forgetful, and without direction. But Gyoko's cruelty slowly awakens the memories he had buried, about his twin brother, loss, and the wound he had forgotten all this time. And from there rises a strength that is born not from hatred, but from an awareness of who he is. Gyoko sees beauty in destruction, but only on the surface. He escapes behind aesthetics to avoid the wound he has never faced. Meanwhile, Muichiro, in the wound that is whole and faced, instead finds himself again. Gyoko is defeated not just by a sword, but by a meaning of life he cannot understand. Hantengu appears like a cowardly demon who can only cry and run, but when attacked, he splits into forms of extreme negative emotions: anger, arrogance, hatred, fear, with Zohakuten as the most powerful manifestation, a form of cruel and wrathful power. What makes Hantengu dangerous is not just his strength, but because he always sees himself as a victim. Even when clearly hurting others, he manipulates pity while continuing to do evil, hiding behind a pretense of innocence. Even as a human, he stole and killed, and then always denied his responsibility. The fight against him is a fight against a psychological form of evil that keeps changing. Tanjiro and the others are not just fighting a body, but also the illusion of weakness that stems from moral immaturity. In the end, Tanjiro is able to defeat Hantengu with the help of Nezuko, who is willing to be burned by the sun for the sake of saving everyone. Hantengu represents an evil that is not born from hatred, but from a weakness that keeps denying reality. He became a monster not because he wanted to, but because he never wanted to admit that he had become the monster itself. After Hantengu is defeated, Nakime is the fourth-ranked demon. She does not speak much, but with the strum of her biwa, she controls the entire Infinity Castle, Muzan's ever-changing headquarters. Without needing to fight directly, she creates disorientation, separates the Slayers, and reverses the battlefield in an instant. She is not faced by Tanjiro directly, but her role is crucial as a controller of space, not a perpetrator of violence. Nakime's threat lies in her way of controlling from behind the scenes. Eventually, Yushiro manages to reverse Nakime's visual system and take control of the castle, turning her own strategy into a boomerang against her. Nakime's defeat does not happen through muscle power, but through intelligence and system intervention. Nakime represents a form of evil that is not visible, a system that is silent but controls everything. She is the embodiment of structural manipulation, not killing directly, but creating the conditions for destruction to happen on its own. Kokoshibo is the strongest demon under Muzan and the only user of demon breathing. He was once Mijikatsu Sugekuni, the older brother of Yoriichi, the creator of sun breathing. Since he was young, he felt inferior to his younger brother and was afraid of dying as an ordinary person. That is why he accepted Muzan's blood, not because of a thirst for power, but because he could not bear the reality that he would never surpass his brother's light. In the climatic battle in the Infinity Castle, he fights against 4 slayers at once: Gyome, Sanemi, Genya, and Muchiro. 2 of them fall, but Kokushibo is finally defeated after a fierce battle. What defeats him is not just his wounds, but the realization of his form, which has completely changed, distancing him from anything he once considered to be himself. In his final moments, he sees his own reflection and does not recognize it. He does not find glory, only the emptiness of an ambition that has lost its meaning. He became a demon not because of hatred, but because he was unable to accept weakness and loss. Kokushibo represents how ambition without acceptance can turn into a curse. He continued to live not to win, but because he could not make peace with defeat. Muzan, the main demon in this story, became a demon not just because he was thirsty for blood. He became a demon because he was afraid. Afraid of dying, afraid of being weak, afraid of being insignificant. Muzan was born as a sick human, not because of his fault, not because of his sin, but because that is how the world works: unfair, random, cruel, without reason. From a very young age, his body had been punished by a disease that could not be explained. The people around him were ready to bury him even before he had a chance to truly live. And when all treatments failed, only one physician tried something that had never been tried before: a blue flower that is almost non-existent, the blue spider lily. The medicine worked. Slowly his body improved, but there was a price that came with it. Muzan could no longer stand under the sun. However, because he could not wait and could not trust and depend on others, he killed the physician, because according to him, he was not healed at that very moment. And with that, he destroyed the only path that could save him. From then on, he lived not only in the shadow of the sun, but also in the shadow of himself. With the supernatural mutation of his body, he could create demons by injecting his blood into humans. And he began to create demons for one purpose: to find that flower again. But all of that was done in isolation and tyranny. He built a kingdom in darkness, surrounded by his created creatures who submitted out of fear. Muzan never fought directly. He did not touch blood with his own hands. He ordered, commanded, punished. He sat far above like a false god who never felt human suffering but wanted to control everything, and the more he gained power, the more he rotted. When Nezuko, a demon of his own creation, was able to stand under the sun, Muzan was not just surprised, he was terrified. He realized that perhaps perfection does not lie in mutation and strength, but precisely in something he had hated from the beginning: love, sacrifice, and gentleness, which made him change his life's purpose from searching for that flower to hunting Nezuko. He did live a long time, but never understood the meaning of the life he lived. He had power, but was never loved. He ruled, but was never truly present. He wanted to avoid weakness, but instead he became the embodiment of weakness itself, a creature that could not accept itself as it was. Muzan is a symbol of a human who rejects his limitations and because of that, loses his own humanity. Tanjiro, who suffered and lost everything, instead found strength in his wounds. Muzan, who rejected all suffering, instead became the source of it all. And perhaps therein lies the boundary between human and demon, not in its power, but in its courage to suffer and still love. And that is also reflected in all the Hashira, all the demons, all the characters we have discussed, about the choices that emerge from the answer to the question: in a world this cruel, how must I live?